What is up, everyone? I hope you're doing fantastic this evening. This is Raphael Garcia here with Schwan Humes for episode number 229 of the MMA Ratings Podcast. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join us. Before I throw it over to Schwan and we get into our show tonight, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's taking the time to listen to us and listen to what we bring every single week. As always, you can check us out across multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and on YouTube at MMA Ratings, as you're probably doing right now. You can hit us up on our flagship at MMAratings.net and .com. You can also catch us on Instagram and Twitter, MMA Ratings Net in both spaces. Myself, I'm R Garcia _sports. Shawan Humes, aka Hoodie Mellow, is at Black Jordan Breen. So Shawan, why don't you let everybody know how you're doing?
Oh, I'm good. Staying busy as always. I don't know, man. I'm just tired of being right all the time. It's a burden. It's a burden.
So let's go ahead, man. We got quite a bit to talk about because I want to get right into it. And UFC 270, Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane fought for the heavyweight title of the world, and we have Francis Ngannou retaining via unanimous decision. I think it was 49-46 twice and 48-47. It wasn't the most exciting fight. It didn't go how well. You're going to talk about how you kind of pretty much planned how that was going to go out. It didn't go how a lot of people wanted it to go, with like a highlight reel knockout or something like that. But it was a fight where Ngannou established himself as someone who was still growing. As someone who was still growing in mixed martial arts. And what did we see there? We saw someone who was able to come into a fight injured, dealing with the ACL and MCL injury, which he's getting surgery for, and find a way to pick apart his opponent. He has some bad spots. I thought he was losing or I thought that it was either tied or he could possibly be behind going into the last round. But he was able to get the victory, out positioning Gane in multiple opportunities to get the win there. So, Schwan, first, let's start with how did you score the fight, if you remember, and then hit me with a technical breakdown. What did you see from both guys?
I thought if I recall correctly, I think I had it 3-2. If I recall, I don't think it was 4-1 because early in the earlier exchanges, I felt like Gane was a little bit more technical. I mean, Ngannou was missing a lot. He landed some fairly big shots, but he wasn't able to really get any momentum on the feet. And I count defense. And Gane was more effective defensively. He didn't do really a lot of damage. He didn't really commit to hard counters consistently, but he was kind of touching Ngannou a lot. He was getting away from Ngannou's bigger shots. And I won't say that to me, because I count offense and defense, I feel like there was a couple, basically those rounds, he was able to kind of control the pace, but as far as damage done or imposing your will or coming forward, I don't think he was doing that. And so I could see an argument where people would say that Ngannou won at 4-1 just because he was imposing his will. He was the one firing off and he landed probably the bigger shots. I just thought Gane was a little bit cleaner, more defensively sound, and I thought he was frustrating Ngannou on the feet a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want me to go into the breakdown or?
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about what you saw from both men and how did it go kind of how you were looking?
Well, I told people this before. I have to say this at the beginning. People on Twitter were like, well, nobody could have seen it going this way. And I'm like, obviously you didn't listen to our podcast. Well, actually almost 200 people listened to it probably after the fact to find out if I said what I said. And I told everybody, I said, what Ngannou's going to do is he's going to pressure him because he's the bigger puncher. He's going to get to the body, kick the legs. He's going to try to get his hands on Gane so he can control him and bully him and land shots. And that he was going to use his wrestling to win a decision. And people just, that's exactly what I said. That's how I ended my prediction. He's going to use his physicality and his strength to pressure him, get to the body, out wrestle him to a decision, which is exactly what happened. And a lot of people can't fathom that because, they feel like something had to be wrong or Gane was off or Ngannou was off. But the fact of the matter is both guys kind of played to their type. The only difference is, as I said before, is Ngannou had already been faced with challenges. He already faced athletic fighters. He already faced fighters with comparable skills. He already had faced guys who put him in adverse situations, and he had to work his way out of them. Gagne hadn't really faced any adversity. He's basically been in control of every fight he's been in. He's been the one landing the most shots. He's been the one avoiding the most shots. He's controlling the pace. He's dictating where the fight goes and where it happens and when he gets a submission and when he lands shots and when he doesn't land shots. For the most part, he's been in complete control. I didn't have any faith that he would be able to navigate a spot when he wasn't put in control. And I didn't have any faith in his corner because his corner is essentially the same corner as Francis Ngannou had. And the habit I've seen in these guys is they're a little bit of front runners. When they have clear advantages and clear paths of victory, they look spectacular. When they face an opponent who can take things away and put their guys in a bad spot or put their guys where they're losing rounds, there aren't very many adjustments to be made. When Ngannou fought Stipe the first time, what adjustment did he make? He made none. And the coach, Ferdinand, blamed that on Ngannou. Maybe it's his fault, maybe it's not. But in the second opportunity, where he had a top-end, high-athletic, high-skilled, dominant heavyweight, as soon as he started losing the fight, he had no options. He had no adjustments. He had no strategic adjustments. He had no technical adjustments. He misread the fight completely. At no point, once Gane lost control of the fight, was he able to really ever regain control. He wasn't able to build any momentum. He wasn't at submission off the back. He couldn't consistently get takedowns of his own. He couldn't really stop takedowns. He couldn't slow down Ngannou's pressure. He just couldn't do much of anything except not get knocked out, by being defensively sound and moving. So I wasn't really surprised by it because I just didn't have any faith that Gane would have an answer if he was put in bad spots, if he wasn't allowed to do what he wanted to do. And I knew that Ngannou, even though both guys had grown since the last time they trained, and Ngannou's trained a lot more. He's gone with a different camp. He's been forced to develop other skills, dealing with Usman and other people. He's been forced to round out his game because he saw what happened when he just leaned on his power and his athleticism against a guy with knowledgeable, experienced striking and a good wrestling game. He saw what happened. And basically what happened to him against Stipe is what he turned around and did to Gagne. That's pretty much what he did. He just took what happened to him and imposed it on Gane, and Gane had no answers for it.
So let me ask you a question. I saw something Ngannou said. I believe it was on Ariel's show, where he said that he looked at Gane and he saw himself when he fought Stipe the first time. And if we can think back to that first fight, the first round was basically Ngannou trying to knock Stipe out, and when he couldn't, it just went downhill from there because he wasn't able to make any adjustments, as you were just saying. What are your thoughts on that there? Do you think that is a good assessment from the champion, talking about what he saw in his contender on Saturday?
Yeah, well, it's like when Ngannou first fought, even when he fought Stipe and fought other people, I said there were holes in his game. People were just looking at the dynamic finishes. They're not understanding that he's a counter guy. They're not understanding that he's not got textbook technique past the first one or two shots. They're not understanding that he hasn't shown any defensive wrestling. He hasn't shown conditioning against it. He hasn't shown ability to work his way into position with jabs, set up combinations. It's all been just he's landing on guys and guys are done. Guys are scared of getting in touch with him. He lands on him, his fight's over. He's just been dominating off being clever, having a decent strategy, and having an incredible skill set. The same thing can be said with Gane. The only difference is Gane was more of a technical fighter. But even in being more technical and defensively sound, the fact of the matter is there's holes in his game. Like people are like, oh, he's untouchable. A lot of guys hit him. Derek Lewis landed on him. Volkov landed on him. Rosenstruck landed on him. They didn't land the way they wanted to land on him, but they landed on him. They got to spots where they could tie him up, get into clinches, or get takedowns. But these fighters, a lot of these fighters don't have that aspect in the game. Rosenstruck doesn't have enough confidence to take someone down. Derek Lewis ain't really trying to take anybody down. And Volkov, probably given how strong Gane is and how physically imposing and how he was controlling him on the feet, he probably didn't want to take any chances on getting sprawled out and punished for the takedown attempt and then end up on his back and get submitted or get beaten up himself. So all that was a combination of Gane's technical skills, his footwork, his ability to manage distance, his ability to land counter shots. But what people were missing out on is the fact that A, you can touch Gane. He's not invincible. B, he's not a guy who takes chances. He's like a Valentina Shevchenko. He won't really ratchet it up until he feels he's like George St. Pierre. He won't ratchet it up until he feels completely safe. He'll pick at you, he'll peck at you, he'll let you run into some shots, But once he starts finding his rhythm and he sees you can't keep up with him, then he'll turn it on. But he's not going to take chances. So anytime you impose your will on him, you come after him, there's not really a high price to pay. He'll kick your legs and land a little shot there, but he won't put a combination together. He won't sit down on a shot and really try to rock you or get you out of there. He's just going to chip away until he sees a clear weakness, and then he's going to explode. You can take advantage of guys like that because they're going to let you stick around because at no point are they trying to end the fight. And while you're defensively sound by moving and slipping and parrying, the fact of the matter is he doesn't have a great jab. His defense is mostly his footwork and his legs. He doesn't move his head particularly well. He doesn't move his upper body particularly well. His shots are fairly predictable. He's just a much better athlete than most guys, and he's much more established in his skill set as far as his striking. But there are holes that you can exploit. And against somebody who's much bigger, who's probably a better athlete, and who hits way harder, and a guy by his own estimation, he said earlier when we sparred before, when Francis got his hands on me, he was so strong I couldn't do anything with him. When you have those kind of physical advantages and you know you can take whatever is coming back at you, and you know that guy won't really turn it on until he sees you hurt, you can just trudge forward. You can use those big shots as entries to get your hands on him. You don't have to take a step back because you know that he's not really going to put any heat on it until he sees you hurt. So you have lots of opportunities to get your hands on him. And when he's pressured, his footwork, it's not as sharp. It seems sharp because he's making guys pay and guys don't want to get hit. So he has more room. His angles are sharper. But when you stay on him, he's not that comfortable. And when you have the threat of really hurting him, he's not nearly as willing to counter. He's just trying to get away and reset and then come back in. He's not punching with you. He's getting out of the way of a shot and then he's firing back, which is the difference between a same time counter and an after time counter. He's countering after the time and then coming back at you. He's not countering with you because he doesn't want to get in exchanges. He doesn't want to put himself at risk. So all Ngannou had to do was impose his will, impose his physicality. And you have to know that Ngannou wasn't expecting him to wrestle. I don't know why he wouldn't expect him to wrestle because nobody's really tried to wrestle him. I don't know why he wouldn't expect that from a guy who's much bigger, much stronger, and probably a better athlete. Why wouldn't he get his hands on you and just take you down? We've never seen you on your back. We've seen you pressured. We've seen you hit, but we've never seen you on your back or pressed up against the cage. Why wouldn't he take that route? The fact that he wasn't prepared for that is yet another example of the limitation of his coaching. So it's the inverted. It's the same thing as what happened in Ngannou, but it's just the inverted version. And in Ngannou's case, he can end the fight like that. So after you get through those first couple minutes, his threat lessens because he spends up so much energy trying to get that takedown. He doesn't have an answer because he didn't expect the fight to go past a round or two. In Ngannou's case, he expects the fight to go rounds. And he's only going to do enough damage and score points and stay out of the way of danger. He's not going to risk hurting you or getting you out of there early. He wants to make sure it's a clear runway for his takeoff. And you could use it, and Francis used that against him by constantly imposing him, pressing him, and making him throw shots he didn't want, making his footwork break down from the threat of his physicality and the threat of his power, and then just getting his hands on him and ragdolling him. And that's what he did. He just ragdolled him. Stipe exhausted Ngannou and kind of suffocated and wore him out. Ngannou just basically controlled position. Once he put Gane on his back, Gane did not have the athleticism or the skill set to get back up. He just controlled him. He didn't really hurt him. He just took him down and controlled him. So I would say that he made a correct assumption. And as I said before the fight, Ngannou's knowledge of Gane was more than Gane's knowledge of Ngannou. He knew Ngannou years ago before he got a new coach, before he got a little bit sharper offensively, before his footwork cleaned up, before he started working on his wrestling entries. He didn't have a point of reference to use. Even if Gane is improved, he's working with the same team. So they have the same philosophy, the same development skills, the same approach. So he knew what to expect, and he was able to exploit it. And Gane wasn't able to exploit what Ngannou did because he had no idea what Ngannou did. He thought Ngannou was going to come in there looking to bang, and Ngannou was like, nah, I got this. I got something else for you.
So what was really interesting there is that you mentioned that Ngannou was just doing a lot of control on the ground, which is very true. He wasn't necessarily looking to even rain down a lot of damage or anything like that. I was surprised to an extent that Gane couldn't create any additional scrambles, maybe get out and get back to his feet, get back to the cage, something like that. That really stood out to me. And then he made the mistake of going for that heel hook when he was in a very bad position, which, I mean, we were watching the fight in the office on Saturday. And when that happened, I mean, it was pretty much like, what are you doing type of moment, because he wasn't anywhere near the correct position to finish that.
Well, one thing, Rahul, you're more of a grappler than I am. Clearly, much more accomplished, much more competition tested. Is against a lesser heavyweight, or maybe someone who doesn't have the athleticism or some of the tools that Ngannou has. I think that maybe Gane could have finished that, or maybe the guy would have just panicked. What do you think? Like a lesser like some of the other heavyweights he beat with those submissions, I think they would have panicked with that leg lock. They might have given up.
See, no, because the position at the very most, if you go back and look at it, at the very most, Ngannou was maybe experiencing a little bit of ankle pain. Like at the very most, if you look at the way Guy sat back and the way he his legs, he wasn't controlling the knee, he wasn't controlling the hips, he wasn't controlling anything really. So at the very most, if Ngannou was experiencing any pain, it was like a minimal ankle pain. So it's nothing to really kind of be the panic from there. If you straighten your leg, kick your foot out, you're able to get on top, just as he did there. What I was wondering was, what coaching did Gagne get heading into that 5th round? Was he fighting thinking as if he was down on the scorecards and he just went for a finish because he thought he had to get the finish? Because how I was looking at that, if he stays on top, he would have he wouldn't have won on the scorecards. But how I was looking at the fight, I thought that at the very most it was tied going into the 5th, and had he stayed on top, I would have thought he had actually won.
Well, my whole impression of it goes back to what I originally said. He doesn't want to take chances. When he, after being summarily taken down repeatedly, had the bigger shots landed on you, been controlled for the majority of the fight, you have one chance when you're a superior position and you're supposedly a world-class athletic striker. How do you not just take a chance and try to finish it? You know, like just open up a strike, see what happens. Maybe you land a shot, maybe you cut him, maybe you rock him, maybe not. But what he did was he played it safe. He went for what he thought was safe. I'll go for the submission. Worst case scenario, I end up on my back and he's on top of me. He's not punishing me, so he'll just control me to the end of the fight. But there's no real risk of getting really taken down again in a really bad position, and there's no real risk of ending up back on the feet or exhausting myself and now being dead tired in front of the biggest puncher in MMA history. Like, he took a safe way out. He never took any sort of chance to defend the takedown or to escape to get back up or to finish the fight. And it's one thing that a lot of fighters mess up when they get into these fights. It's like Chuck Liddell used to say. He's like, you know why I'm so hard to take down or hard to keep down? Because I'm willing to risk getting submitted. I'll get up in a sloppier manner to risk getting submitted to make sure I am not controlled and allow for them to secure a position and finish me. Everybody wants to make sure they don't roll into the arm bar, into the guillotine, the knee bar, whatever. Sometimes you just need to get up. Sometimes the best thing you do is you take down, you give everything you can to get back to your feet, because that guy has to take you down again. You get back up. You're wearing on each other. So if you have a little bit more than him, you can get to him later. But Gagne was trying to make sure, Gane was trying to tie up, make sure he didn't get bombed on, make sure that Ngannou couldn't improve position instead of just scrambling and forcing a pace. And now in hindsight, knowing about Ngannou's knees, if he would have been forced to scramble, there's no way his body would have really held up. He would have had a lot of opportunities, but you have to take chances. And it's like I told you before, we talked about before with open scoring. Some fighters are just risk averse. And that's just a reality. Just like people always say, oh, you got I've never fought again, but just to be clear, I've never fought. When I spar people, I'll tell the fighter I'm working with, you have to accept you're going to get hit and walk through fire and get to this person. Me personally, when I spar, I'm like a pot shot guy. I mean, if I had to, maybe, but that's not my first, second, or third option. That's not who I am. And it's clearly not who Gane is. And for Gane to really make the leap past elite guys, he's going to have to take some chances. He's going to have to risk getting finished. He's going to have to risk getting exhausted to win. And that was the difference. And Gane was willing to sell out on those takedowns and go outside of his comfort zone and risk exposing himself. Because if Gane was ready for those, he could have submitted them. He could have scrambled and got back to his feet, and Ngannou would have been in a world of trouble. Ngannou took chances. Stipe did against him. Gane refused to take chances. He refused to do anything different. He wanted to make sure he was 100% safe. He wasn't taking any unnecessary punishment. He wasn't taking any other necessary chances of getting submitted or in a bad position where he'd get hit. And that's what eventually cost him the fight. At no point did he try a flying knee, try to land something big on the feet, or try to scramble back up. It was always, let me make sure I can tie him up, make sure I'm right position. Now I'll start working. When you got a guy that big, that strong, who knows how to wrestle on top of you, what are you going to do? You're not getting a better position. You're not submitting him from the bottom. Gane's not that kind of fighter. So it's like he gave the fight away because he didn't want to push himself. Ngannou lost against Stipe because he couldn't push himself as far as cardio and technique. Gane lost the fight because he wouldn't push himself as far as taking a risk and being more offensively aggressive. There were moments where he could have gotten Ngannou on the feet. And at the end of the fight where he took him down, he could have got him on the ground. But he'd rather just let me be safe and try for the submission instead of just selling out to finish. And I think there would have been a good chance for him to finish if he could have just opened up.
Yeah, I mean, that's some really good thoughtful information there, sir. Let's move on a little bit because I don't want to go too far over time today. Let's talk about what's next for both individuals here. Francis Ngannou, he's getting surgery on his ACL and MCL, so that's probably going to put him out for 10 months at the very least. He's made it clear he will not fight for $500,000, $600,000 anymore. He wants 7 figures and up. And he's in a position where his contract is expected to end in January of next year. So do you think this is the last time we saw Francis Ngannou fight in the octagon?
I don't know because I would probably say you have to say yes because otherwise the UFC would have to concede to his request. They'd have to leave it open for boxing. They'd have to guarantee to pay him so much more money. And the thing about it is Ngannou did. I always talk about guys who complain about money. They won't go into specifics. They won't risk their career. They won't bet on themselves. They always talk a little bit to get attention, and they always talk about how it's everybody else, it's everybody else, it's everybody else, and then they get paid and they shut up. Or what's worse is guys are company men until they start losing, and then they start talking. Ngannou won his title, and in the biggest spot, started talking. Then he had this other fight against a guy who had a very good chance of beating him, stylistically speaking, and he was injured, and he still came in talking before, knowing he wasn't 100%, knowing he could lose, and if he got knocked out or submitted or even lost a decision, it was all over. The UFC was going to just bury him. He was going to be done. Kept talking. He won the fight, and even after the fight, he's continued to talk. So I acknowledge him for that, and he's one of the few guys, like he said he's willing to walk away. He's willing to end his career if that's what it takes for him to not be tied to the UFC and not be under the UFC's control. That's why I say I don't know if he's going to fight again. Because if the UFC gives him what he wants, it's not in other cases, everybody's very vague. So the UFC can say, we came to an agreement, we did good business, yada, yada, yada. Dana White's been saying he's been advised wrong. He's not very smart. People around him aren't very smart. And Ngannou has been very obvious about what the UFC's told him, how they harass his management, how there's been veiled threats at him. He's gone into great detail. So if they give him what he wants, the UFC is eventually showing that you can pull their card. Everybody else who goes head-to-head with the UFC, like a game of chicken, they veer off first. The UFC keeps going. Ngannou is not blinking. He refuses to turn. He'll just crash head on and die. He's not going to veer off and let the UFC up the hook. So I don't know in what world Dana White is going to willingly accept the fact that some fighter who essentially made his entire name in the UFC, it wasn't a guy who had a name outside the UFC, he made his name in the UFC, is now dictating terms to him and put himself in pole position where he can call all the shots, and the UFC is going to have to capitulate if they want to keep him on the active roster. At this point, I don't know if that's logical, and I don't know if that's likely. I mean, what are they going to do? Do another interim title buy with Gane and somebody? Gane already lost. He already lost in Ngannou. Nobody's going to buy that. What are they going to do? Stipe was already lost.
What I think they'll do, if it was me, and what I think they will do is they'll book some type of tournament, like a UFC standard. And yes, Ngannou won't be a part of the tournament, so like their champion will be gone. But if it was me, I would look at booking a 8-man tournament. And I'm going to pull up the UFC rankings real quick. Let's see who would be a part of this.
It's heavyweight. It's heavyweight. Can you find 8 fighters who should be fighting?
So here you go. Like if we're gonna do this, and they said let's do a tournament to find a replacement. You can go Cyril Gane, Stipe Miocic, Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, Jared Rosenstruck. They can even do Chris Dawkins. And if they were smart, they would pay John Jones to be that 8th heavyweight.
But let's look a little bit deeper in this. They put themselves in an awkward situation. Too. So now you've had this guy pull your card, pull the curtain back, And even if they have this tournament, the specter of Ngannou is going to be over it. People are still going to bring this question up. Why isn't Ngannou involved? Will the winner face Ngannou first? That's going to be another question. And secondly, to get John Jones to fight, John Jones wants to be paid. So either way, then Dana White's going to have to concede to someone to get what he wants and to make it anywhere near a viable and financially successful operation. He's going to have to concede somewhere. He doesn't want to concede to John Jones. But if Ngannou's out, he almost needs Jones to make this somewhat legitimate and have some sort of presence. Gane doesn't sell. Stipe Miocic doesn't sell. None of the names you mentioned sell except for John Jones. So then John Jones has got to get paid. And if John Jones gets paid, guess what the question is now? Well, you met his demands. Why the hell aren't you meeting the heavyweight champion's demands? Well, we've got to talk it over with his management. Nah, dude, we already know we know about his management. It's put them in a very, very tough spot. Either way, they're going to have to give in to somebody. And once that little crack in the what do you call it, dam comes, everybody's going to. It's like when Suge Knight got knocked out, so everybody started talking shit. If Dana was knocked out by Ngannou or Jones, everybody's going to be talking shit to Dana White.
I was not expecting us to have a Suge Knight reference on tonight's show. So let's move on to the next topic. Deiveson Figueiredo is your new flyweight champion. He defeated Brandon Moreno via unanimous decision. Now these two are 1-1-1 against each other. Let's talk about what we saw in the fight, and let's roll from there. From my perspective, I picked Brandon Moreno to win. He did not respond to Figueiredo's pressure from the very start. He had his moments, but I think that Figueiredo put it on him early and enough to make him question his game. Everything he looked to be a step behind Figueiredo in all of the exchanges from the first round all the way up through the fifth. And that's really something that really surprised me, especially if you look at what I wrote about the preview for this fight. Like I said, I expected Moreno to win and win via violent fashion. What do you think happened there, Schwan, and what did you see in Figueiredo to help him pick up the victory?
Well, it's like I said before. Figueiredo's thing, what Henry Cejudo was going to do is the same thing he did for Wiley to a degree. He's going to make you fight with more poise. He's going to make you manage distance a little bit better. In the case of Wiley against Rose, he made Wiley draw Rose in. In the case of Deiveson Figueiredo, instead of Deiveson leaping in with a left hook or leaping with a big right hand or leaping in for a takedown, he worked his way into the range. Because Deiveson always would come right at you, but now he was stalking, he was kind of pressuring, he's coming in behind weapons, sometimes jabbing, sometimes kicks, but he's working his way into range. Moreno was expecting Deiveson to do the same thing he always does, come out guns blazing, trying to land those big hard shots that are going to scare you off and allow him to take control of the fight. Deiveson, and I'm assuming, I don't know that he learned this, but I'm assuming Cejudo and Eric Albertine, I think that's how you say his name, my apologies, I think they watched the film and they realized, and Cejudo trained with Moreno. Moreno's not going to get scared. You're not going to intimidate him. That's not going to work. Moreno's tough. You're going to have to really put him out. He's not just going to get stunned and lay down there. He's going to be trying to get up. You get him a submission. You're going to have to choke him out. He's not just going to tap because it's uncomfortable. You can't afford to blow your energy trying for an immediate finish or trying to bomb him out to send a message. You got to work your way into spots, use your advantage in length, speed, and power, and punish him. And that's all he did. He's a better athlete. He's a bigger athlete. He's a harder hitter. He's got every sort of single advantage physically. The only advantage he didn't have in the second fight was his cardio wasn't there and his durability wasn't there. I think part of that was because of the weight. And secondly, he was exposing himself because instead of setting his stuff up, picking his shots and using controlled aggression, he was just trying to get him out there, coming in wide open with telegraph shots, getting sloppy in exchanges, not being defensively sound because he figured, oh, I can take whatever's coming back at me, and that guy can't take what I'm throwing to him. He didn't go in there with that arrogance or that position of working from an advantageous position. He acted like they were both equal, and he needed to go through every single step to get where he needed to get to so he could maximize the damage and maximize positions, which is basically what I said. Moreno is always going to be tough because Moreno fights at pace. Moreno has volume. He's going to always make a run in a fight because he's tough. He comes forward and he's got good skills. But what allows him to dictate the terms of fights is that A, he'll fight you at every range. B, you can't possibly scare him off. And that's what allows C, his improvements technically as far as his boxing at range, his ability to counter and his ability to put shots together. That's what allowed him to have success. It's predicated on these first two things. Because Deiveson was using more controlled aggression and footwork, the fight never got really out of hand. And because Deiveson was carefully getting into certain positions, he wasn't forced to have to defend takedowns. He wasn't forced to take unnecessary shots. He wasn't forced to waste a bunch of energy getting into position because he was using controlled aggression, which took away the first two advantages Moreno has. So then it came down to a matter of skill. And even though I think Moreno's probably a little bit more skilled subtly, especially when you get further along in exchanges, he's probably more established in that in wrestling and striking. The fact of the matter is, Deiveson is such a better athlete that as long as he fights with some conceptual awareness and strategic discipline, the matter of skill won't even be a factor as long as he doesn't get tired. And the matter of skill never was. Moreno landed some shots. Moreno had some moments where he started making runs. But since Deiveson had controlled his aggression and controlled his energy expenditure, he was never in a position where he was totally out of position to be taken down, totally out of position throwing shots, or totally out of position because he was backing out with his hands down or standing right in front of Moreno. He was using angles, using pressure, using accuracy to break Moreno down and back Moreno up. And that poise and that discipline is what turned the fight. It wasn't anything. He's probably in better shape, but if he was in better shape, but still fighting the same dumb way, Moreno would have had wide open avenues to take him down, to land shots. He would have got going early, and then Deiveson would have been a step behind the entire fight. He was a step ahead because he did not make himself as available for leads or counters versus Moreno. That's it. One change.
So do we go back to the fourth fight now? They're 1-1-1, right? Yeah, 1-1-1 against each other. And I see majority of people talking about, yeah, we're ready for the fourth fight. We can see the fourth fight happening. So yes or no, do we go back to the fourth fight? And if we do not go back to the fourth fight, who is next up for the champion? Because that division is not very deep. So where do we go if we don't go back to the former champion?
If they do it in Mexico, it's a huge money fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fight that everybody likes. There hasn't been one bad fight between them. It's a huge fight in Mexico. Brandon Moreno has got a great personality. He's got some charm. He's got a tough luck story. He's proven to be world class as a fighter. Like, this dude is going to be a star outside way after his career is done. He's just got that kind of vibe to him. So they can maximize that. Put that in Mexico, headline it. It's going to sell out. It's going to be huge. It'll be huge across two continents. It'll be amazing. It could be a very big event. Deiveson seems to want it, and I know Moreno probably wants it too. So I don't see why it doesn't happen unless Dana White just is like, I'd rather see something different. But I don't know that I don't know that Deiveson's going to stick around to face someone else. And I mean, Moreno's going to be there for a while, so Moreno's going to have multiple bites at the apple. But I don't know that Deiveson sticks around to fight some other ranked guy, especially guys he thinks he's far and away better than. The thing that I think unnerves him about this fight is that he had a draw from the first time. He got beaten decisively the second time. And even though he won this time, it wasn't by finish and it wasn't completely dominant. And I think that sticks at him. So now he wants Moreno to be at his best, be where he's comfortable, and he wants to beat him and dominate him in a similar fashion in front of his people, in front of his crowd. So he can silence everything and he can kind of put a stamp on that for fight, in this 4-fight or whatever series between him and Moreno.
Can that fight headline the whole card in Mexico?
If it's in Mexico, yeah. I think Moreno's very huge. Canelo will be there. Canelo will probably drop by. It'll be a big thing. It'd be a big thing. They've been trying to get into that market. They finally have a guy who's a champion. He lost in a contested, disputed decision, according to the fans. It's a huge fight over there. And I think a lot of people come out to see it. And Deiveson talks enough trash and has a little bit of a arrogant vibe around him that will bring attention. Henry Cejudo, with his background, would also bring attention because he's cornering against his countrymen. It has a lot of storylines. They've had 3 great fights, and it's fighting in another country where they have one of their actual people fighting for a world title on the biggest stage in the biggest organization in mixed martial arts. How does that not sell? I mean,
Very
we're not talking about Alexa Grasso. We're talking about Brandon Moreno. Two different things here.
Why you gotta take shots at everybody? First it was Suge Knight, now it's Alexa Grasso. Man, what's wrong? I'm telling you, you are legit acting like Hoodie Mello right now. Hoodie Mello in the building.
Everybody's catching strays. If you're in the MMA world, you don't know when you're gonna get hit.
Anyway, so let's move on. What else, was there anything else that stood out from you for UFC 270? For me, it was Kay Hansen. She did not look the part this time around. I remember when she was basically not the second coming, but a lot of people expected a lot from her, and this is her second loss in a row. That kind of stood out for me, so I'm paying close attention to her development and what she looks like and who does she fight next when she comes back into the octagon, when that may be. She's still very young. She has an opportunity to do a lot of growth, but I was expecting her to pick up that victory on Saturday. What stood out for you, Schwan? Was it that or something else?
That was just terrible, man. That was awful. Like I mentioned this before. I said this should be a fight for her to win. She's a better athlete. She's clearly the person they were behind. I think she generally has the better skills because she's not a good enough athlete or big enough fighter to just impose her will on anybody like that. And she just fought. And I said, the fight against Jinh Yu Frey, you saw some holes in her. She was trying to impose her will. And because Jinh Yu Frey is such an athlete and kind of a physical fighter, Jinh Yu Frey was able to shrug her off, meet her aggression, land some shots, and win the first round. She just wore her down because Jinh Yu Frey can't fight at pace. She fights based off of control and asserting herself, and then just breaks you down over the length of the fight using her athleticism and her physicality. For some reason, someone in Kay Hansen's camp told her that she's some sort of dominating wrestler or some kind of physical dynamo, which I said not just on this show, but on another podcast, the big topic in women's mixed martial arts, that she is not a good enough athlete to fight in the manner that she fought against Jinh Yu Frey. She wasn't a good enough athlete to fight in the way she fought in her last fight. I think that was against Miranda Maverick, right? Might have been. I'm not sure. And she wasn't a good enough athlete or big enough, strong enough athlete to fight this way against Jasmine. Jasmine is a very limited fighter as far as her striking, very limited as far as her grappling, very limited as far as her wrestling. What she does is she gets by on aggression and physicality because she's big and strong for the weight class. Kay Hansen, instead of using her speed and quickness, which she had an advantage of because she's from a smaller weight, she could have stuck, chopped her up, used a jab, used body punches. She comes head in trying to take her down. Wore herself out trying to get a takedown, got pushed back, got beat up, got stuck with a jab, got kicked to the body, got taken down, and got roughed up. It was a terrible game plan. And she was great things were expected of her, but that's assuming that her camp was going to develop her appropriately. And she looks like the same fighter who fought Jinh Yu Frey. She doesn't look 1 ounce better. She actually looks worse. That was a dumb fight plan, and she's too raw as a fighter to know how to make an adjustment in round when her team is clearly not giving her the right instruction. Now, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they told her something different. And if that's the case, then she just doesn't listen, much like Justine Kish doesn't, and that's what she lost. But if they didn't give her better direction and they didn't train her better, understanding this is a bigger, stronger, more durable opponent, so you use your speed and your quickness and advantage over her, you don't meet her head on, then the whole camp should be fined or at least fired because they were paid to do a job, and they did not do it very well. She was completely unprepared for the opponent she faced. That was terrible. Terrible fight plan, terrible fight execution, horrible loss, and now her whole standing is she's tumbled down the rankings, and people are wondering what she's going to do next. And I don't care if she's dropping down a weight class. If she's going to fight with that sort of lack of cage IQ and discipline, she ain't winning nothing. She ain't winning nothing. She ain't going nowhere. That was a dumb fight plan and a dumb approach.
So let's move on.
Oh, I'm not the only one who said this either. I talked to a lot of coaches. They all agreed. I'm not going to say who they were, but trust me, they were like, dude, you told me that she might do this. And I said, there's no way. I know those guys over there. There's no way. Right again. What am I going to do? I ain't going to say no names, but I'm not the only one who sees this. So don't get mad at me. There's a lot of other people who think of the same thing. I guarantee you Jasmine's corner was like, I can't believe she's serving herself up like this. What is she doing? Does she think she's gonna bully me? Oh my God. Let me put something on this little girl.
Yeah, it was definitely that was a performance I was not expecting to see. On Saturday and today, we got 2 big announcements for UFC 274, which is scheduled for May 7th. The first is Glover Teixeira is defending his title against Yuri Prochazka. And today we found out that Charles Oliveira is defending his lightweight title against Justin Gaethje. So let's talk about those two fights first, starting with the lightweight title strap. What are some of your
Heavyweight?
starting with the lightweight fight, Oliveira and Gaethje first. What are some of your early thoughts about that contest there? I just wrote a piece about that just came out earlier today for my preview and prediction. I'm picking Oliveira to win, but what are some of your thoughts about that?
I think it's similar to the Dustin Poirier fight. You have an MMA striker against an MMA fighter. Dustin Poirier isn't a great kicker. He's not a great grappler. He's not a great wrestler. He can do those things, but it's always built around his ability to dominate on the feet. Justin Gaethje is better in the clinch, better kicker, all that stuff, but he's not a better all-around striker. His hands are educated, but a lot of that is a matter of his punching power, his chin, his aggression, stylistic and strategic things that he can take advantage of. You can exploit him, on the feet. It's been done before. Dustin Poirier exploited him on the feet. Oh my Lord, this cat I'm gonna have to send him somewhere. Dustin Poirier explodes them, limited to a certain degree. Who else did Eddie Alvarez outboxed them on the feet? It's not like it's impossible to get to Justin Gaethje on the feet. The problem is Oliveira maybe can't purely out-wrestle Gaethje, but in an MMA category, he can match him. He can be close to him. In the striking, he can be close to him. He's done it against just as accomplished strikers as Gaethje for the most part. But when it gets to the ground, Gaethje, outside of ground and pound, there's really nothing Gaethje can do to him. He's light years better than him. He can meet Gaethje at his strength. He can meet him where it's neutral, and he can totally dominate him in his strength. So to me, it's a lot similar to the Dustin Poirier fight. And if Dustin couldn't scare Oliveira off, I don't know that Justin Gaethje does. And just even though Gaethje uses pressure and volume and these kicks, we saw when he fought Khabib, he was a little bit more careful. He was trying, instead of coming forward, he was trying to get away because he didn't want to get tied up. He didn't want to get dragged down. He didn't want to be on the ground for even a second because he knew he was that far outclassed. Against Khabib, the only concern is being taken down and getting submitted. Against Oliveira, if you throw a combination and he pulls guard or y'all tumble to the ground, he can scramble. He can finish from the bottom. He can finish in transition. He can finish from the top. So when it gets to the ground, there's no comparison. And you being a grappler, you can't make up the instincts, the subtleties, and the ability to just on the fly, just like that. You can't do that in a camp. You can't do that in 2 camps. You can't do that in 3 camps. That takes years of development and time. Like you can scheme certain things, but you can't have an answer for every circumstance. And on the ground, Oliveira's going to have an answer for everything he does. And on the feet, Gaethje can't come at him full bore because if he overcommits, reacts to takedown, now he's on his back. He doesn't want that. If he lands a shot and tries to come up and finish, he might end up in a triangle or an armbar. It's not impossible for him to win, but initially, if he doesn't just dominate him and blow him out of the water, the further this fight goes, the less chance Gaethje has of winning it because his only chance of winning is really just to knock him out. I don't think he's got the energy to wrestle for 5 rounds. If he submitted Charles Oliveira, the internet would completely collapse. So the only chance he has is knocking him out on the feet. And Oliveira's shown enough against enough guys to show that that's not a guarantee either. It should be exciting, but if Trevor Whitman pulls this one off, it'll probably be his best coaching job ever because he's got a guy who is clearly outgunned and has a clear weakness in 2/3 of mixed martial arts.
Good stuff there, sir. All right. What was Teixeira? Yuri Prochazka. I think we're going to have a new champion there. What about you?
Well, before we talk about this, and this is just going to be me being very tacky as usual, last time Jerry lost was to King Mo Lawal, guy who helped him with that game plan to beat Jerry. That's me. So I'm 1-0 against him. Anybody wants some tips, feel free to call me. I mean, it's just the facts. These are just facts. You can call King Mo, he'll tell you. These are facts. Knockout win over him, 1-0. Schwan's here, Jerry's down here. I hope he wins because then I 1-0 against the light heavyweight champion. I just like that. Huh?
They rematched though, didn't they?
I was not a part of that. I was not part of that corner. Ain't got nothing to do with me.
Okay.
Got nothing to do with me. I'm 1-0 again, so I can't vouch for these other people. Should have come back to the source. Maybe it would have happened again. Anyways, but it's a tough matchup for Glover Teixeira. He's obviously got the seasoning. He's got the will to win. He's got the grappling. He's got even the wrestling to a certain degree. But unlike Jan, Jiri is very dynamic. Jiri is very explosive. And Jiri he doesn't have the fear that Jan has. He's not just going to be afraid to take chances. He's not going to be afraid to press. He's not going to be afraid to push the pace, even on the ground. He'll explode out of bad spots. He'll try to get back up to inflict punishment. He'll take chances on the feet to get to Glover because he feels he can get Glover out of there. So while I think that Jiri will expose himself repeatedly to being finished, I have my doubts as to whether Glover can be in the fight long enough to wear him out or for him to make a mistake that he can capitalize on. I'm not saying it's impossible because Glover is impressed a lot, but Glover has a problem with athleticism. He has a problem with big, strong guys, and now he's got the most athletic and the most dynamic guy in the division in front of him, and he's going to be another year older by the time that fight happens.
Interesting. I'm definitely picking Prochazka to win. I think he's gonna hurt Glover early, and I think he's gonna be able to finish him as well there. Let's flip the script over to
hold on 1 second. For 1 second, let me see what this dude is doing.
Schwan's cat has made it very clear that every Wednesday when we tape, that's now time to scream bloody murder. And every week for the last 3 weeks, if you go back and watch our past episodes, that cat is screaming like it is being abused. When in reality, it just wants a little bit of attention. My two are over here being super quiet as usual, and you see that Schwan has his over there screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs. But we're gonna flip over and talk about some boxing now because I saw an interesting piece on ESPN.com where they were talking about what's next for Canelo, and they gave us 3 options. They gave us Jermell Charlo. They gave us Triple and Charlo. They laid it out. Charlo is the most expected fight of the 3, but they gave us Jermell Charlo. They gave us Triple G as an option, and Dimitri Bivol. Is that right?
Bivol.
Okay, so those are the 3 options. Of those 3, which one do you see Canelo fighting and when? I'm expecting him to fight probably next in May, Cinco de Mayo weekend. So when do you see him fight, or excuse me, who do you see him fighting if that's the next big weekend?
I don't think it's Golovkin because Golovkin's supposed to fight in Japan against Murata, and that's going to be a huge payday for him. That's going to be big money, big advertisements, big money inside and outside the ring. I can't imagine he's going to turn that down just to fight Canelo. I know it's a big fight, but he'd want that fight after he faced Murata. But honestly, Canelo's already beaten him clearly. I don't know that Canelo even thinks that's worth his time. It's kind of a move backwards because he's fighting well over 160 and Golovkin still is 160. I don't think he's going back down to 160. Bivol is interesting, but Bivol doesn't really he doesn't have a big presence outside of the hardcore boxing. It would be the most difficult fight and challenging, but I don't know if it's the most financially rewarding as far as exposure and as far as opening himself to a different market and being able to sell the fight. He probably goes to Charlo. Charlo's brash. Charlo talks. He has a lot of knockouts. He's supposedly been chasing Canelo for years and years, and it's a fight that a lot of people want. So I would think PBC's got the biggest offer, and I would think it'd be the best chance of him having another breakthrough pay-per-view, and then it'd be finally him fighting a world championship black fighter, which people say he's consistently ducked, even though he's beaten multiple world champion black fighters. But they keep saying he's afraid of him. So this ends that conversation, and it's the easiest fight to make. Easiest fight with the least amount of hang-ups as far as contracts and things.
So what else is going on in the world of boxing? I looked around today before we hopped on the show, trying to find a couple of different topics. What else is popping out in the world of the squared circle?
Well, the big news was Gary Russell Jr., who was the longest reigning champion in boxing. I think he held his title for 6 years, maybe 7. He lost his title to a Manny Pacquiao fighter, Mark Masaiko, if I'm saying it correctly. Gary Russell Jr. is a guy who has great physical tools, great technical tools, probably one of the better boxers in this generation, probably one of the most gifted boxers of this generation. But instead of being known for his blazing fast hands, his high IQ, or his skill set, what he's known for is a guy who fights like once or twice a year. He's had the title for almost 6 years. I think he's defended it 6 times. He just doesn't fight very often. He was holding out for big fights. He was holding out for big names. and he was never able to wrangle one in except for when he fought Lomachenko before Lomachenko became big and he was defeated. But he regained his title, and he had been continuing to fight on, and he lost his fight. He got injured in it, but essentially, oh, I can't stand this cat. Essentially what happened is he did what a lot of guys nowadays do. They don't fight often, so they don't stay sharp. And if they get older, some of those physical tools they have don't age as well because you're not actively fighting. You're not out there testing yourself. So they fought a young, big, strong guy who was fast, and you started seeing the loss of physical skills. You started seeing a little bit loss of physicality. People are going to point to the fact that he got injured in the fight. I think part of him being injured is the fact that he's been active. He hasn't fought for 2 years. And then he goes from not fighting in 2 years to fighting a world-class opponent who's not just a mandatory, who's got skills and experience. He's facing a guy who's got comparable athleticism. Against one of his typical mandatories, he has enough skills and enough athleticism to outclass them. But what he did against a guy who maybe the gap in speed is only this much and the gap in power is much broader and the gap in size and physical strength is much broader, the usual buffer zones he has, the safety zones he can go to, the way he can scare guys off with his speed and sharp punches, it did not exist against this guy. And so in a fight that he probably would have won against a lesser opponent, eked out, he wasn't able to do it. He was out hustled late. He was kind of backed up, and he wasn't able to put enough shots together or blunt the guy's pressure enough to win the fight. People are going to say he was injured, but that's part of fighting. I've seen world-class guys beat other world-class guys with one hand. Gary Russell Jr. just was unable to do it. And as a result now, he's taking quite a tumble because he's never been a very popular champion. He's never been an active champion. And the only thing he had to bring people to the table was the fact that he was a long-standing world champion. And now he's not even that. The one good thing about him waiting so much and not fighting often, I believe, this is just my belief, I believe he's been on the decline for the last 2 or 3 years. But you didn't notice it because, A, he's fighting mandatories who aren't of his caliber skill-wise and aren't of his caliber athletically. So you never saw that retardation as far as his physical skills, that deterioration. You didn't see him fight enough to really notice it. You didn't see him fight good enough athletes to notice it. But once you saw him facing real speed and you saw him facing a guy he couldn't just clearly outclass in every area, you know, those hands weren't as quick, those reflexes weren't as sharp, and that timing was not pinpoint like you expected with him. The boxing skill was there, the IQ was there, but those physical advantages he's leaned on heavily weren't there to the degree they used to be there. And that comes from inactivity and age. And he's, I think, 30, I want to say he's in 32, maybe 33. He's getting older, and he spent the majority of his time talking about fighting people and very little of his time actually fighting world-class opponents. So if you look at his record carefully, the 2 best athletes he faced, I guess the 2 best guys he faced, I guess given the fact that this guy Mark is on his way up and he was a guy a prospect who turned into a legitimate contender, you could say against the 2 best athletes he faced, the 2 best, toughest tests he had physically, he lost, and he lost fairly decisively. Lomachenko and now Masaigo. So that kind of puts a ding on his reputation. And for a guy who was the longest reigning champion in boxing until this weekend, it was one of the most uneventful, unexciting, and unmemorable reigns ever. It's just more of a question of what could he have been if he had more willingness to fight more, and who could he have gotten in the ring with him if he had made his grievances in the ring instead of just doing 50,000 interviews outside of it and having one fight for every 2,000 interviews he did.
Some good insight there, sir, as usual. Good insight. So let everybody know what you're working on as we go ahead and close out the show for this week. And we'll shut things down and come back for episode 230 next week. Let us know. I
got an article I'm going to do for another site, Severe MMA, breaking down the Kavanaugh versus court fight for Bellator. I've already still got the article about Colby Covington. They'll probably get released around the time for the Masvidal fight. I still have the article with Carolina Kovacevic that I really think a lot of people would like, just because most people talk about someone as they ascend and they talk about all the things that were done right, all the things that set them up. This is doing the reverse. I talk about every mistake that was made, from how her camp trained her to how they viewed her to how she fought and how that led her down to the path she's at, from going from being a number 1 contender title challenger to being somebody who couldn't probably be the top 15 girl in her division. And I have some insight into that because I helped Claudia Gadelia her team when they were in New Mexico, her other team, when she fought Kovacevic. So I had an idea. I had to do a lot of research as far as her fighting style, how they trained her, and how they viewed her. I had to do a lot of research on that. So I feel like I have a better than average view as to the mistakes that were made that led her to the point of being where she's not even really shown to be even competent in the cage anymore. So hopefully those two pieces get released in the near future. And other than that, I'm just kind of engaging people on Twitter. You know, you want to talk about cornering, you want to talk about fighters. You have a fighter, you want to know what they should improve or where they're lacking at. I do that kind of stuff all the time, and a lot of fighters don't like it. Neither do their camps, but that's not my problem. So
good stuff there, sir. I am working on covering as much pro wrestling as possible, slowly getting back into the flow of covering more MMA. I'm working on a piece about Ngannou's next steps that will probably be on MMA ratings maybe sometime later on this week. But with that in mind, man, we're going to go ahead and close out because we are at about an hour here, and we're trying to keep the show to about an hour or so. So thank you to everyone who has joined us for tonight's episode. You can always find us across multiple podcasting platforms, and you can check us out at MMARatingsNet.com, which are our flagship, or hit us up at MMA Ratings on YouTube. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to all of our content there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will be back next week for episode 230. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody.
Stay safe.